Have you ever run out of money before the month ended? You know you're not going to have another paycheck for a few days, but there are still bills to pay, still groceries and gas to buy. Why does this happen? Well, it's probably because you forgot to monitor your money. If you just spend optimistically, you're probably going to run out of money. Well, it's pretty much the same story with our time. If we don't monitor our time, we run out of time. We might spend too long on one task and then find we don't have enough time for the next one or the one after that. Sometimes we just forget to keep an eye on the clock. We're just too optimistic. We really should stop working at a certain time. We don't want to become workaholics. So the only way to stay on track really is to watch the clock. So in this video, we're going to look at some practical tips to help you monitor your time. First of all, have a clock nearby. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but sometimes we think it's a certain time and it's really not. It might be later, might be earlier. So the only way to know for sure is to have a clock nearby. So there are several options for this. Just choose the one that's easiest for you, the one that's the most visible. So you could have a clock on the wall, and if that's your choice, then probably you should have it where you can see it without turning away from your computer. What you want to do is keep an eye on the clock, but you don't want it to distract your focus too much. So you want to be able to just kind of glance at it quickly. Another option is a regular watch, an analog watch that you could look at. And then also a digital watch, like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, something like that. The only thing is sometimes you have to tap those to get the time to show because the screen goes blank after a little while. So that's just an extra step. And you want this to be as simple as possible. If you're working on a computer, obviously there's a clock down in the bottom right corner usually. And if you want to be even more conscious of your time and you use the computer clock, you can enlarge it and have it showing on the screen. So the point here is to always know what time it is, not to just be caught up in your work to the point where you forget what time it is, because then you might end up taking too long for something. So that first step is to have a clock nearby, whichever one works best for you. The second tip is to check the time every few minutes. Now, you don't want to do this so often that you can't focus on your work. That could just get stressful. You know, every minute, if you're checking to see what time it is, that's just really going to bog you down. You're not going to get as much work done because you won't be as productive if you're checking the time every minute or two. But you want to always be aware of what time it is while you're working. So if you check it every few minutes, then you kind of could keep track of where you're at. Now, we don't do this when we're not working because we're supposed to enjoy our downtime. We're supposed to be able to relax and kind of get into a lower gear. So you don't want to become a clock watcher in your non-working hours. But when you are working, you want to stay productive, and the best way to do that is to keep an eye on the time. So if you have a set amount of time for a certain task or part of a project, this is going to help you stay on track. Because remember, if you spend longer than you planned on one thing, it's going to cause a domino effect. That one thing that's late is going to make the next thing be late, and then it's just going to spiral from there, and your day is not going to turn out the way that you planned. So it's important to check the time every few minutes, just so that you're aware of what time it is, what's going on, how long it's taking you to do things, so that you can monitor your progress throughout the day and accomplish what you set out to do. The third tip is to set checkpoints for longer tasks. So if you're just doing a little task that takes 15 minutes, then there's no need to keep checking while you're doing that. You could just finish it up. But if you're doing something that takes longer, like say an hour or two or maybe even more, you can break that task usually into smaller tasks. And that way you can allot a certain amount of time for each step. And so you can have checkpoints along the way. So maybe you are going to finish step 1 in 15 minutes and step 2 is going to take you half an hour. But that's going to help you monitor your time and kind of stay on track. So instead of wondering, am I going to finish this whole big project on time? I'm just kind of guessing. No, it's better to have checkpoints. And so if you end up being late to a checkpoint, then you know that you need to make some adjustments. And you could speed up if necessary to make sure that you're going to finish on time. Now, I kind of like to make this into a contest, especially if I'm doing something that's a little routine or maybe kind of boring, kind of repetitive. I like to make it into a contest with myself, and I set checkpoints. Okay, I'm going to be done this much by this time, and then I try to beat the clock. So my goal is to actually do it faster than what I thought, and each time I do it to get faster and faster because I'm more familiar with the task, so it's a little easier. It just kind of makes it a little more fun. It also keeps your brain sharp and helps you to have laser focus, because when you are focused on beating the clock, you've made it into a contest, then you know you can't afford to be distracted. And so things that are kind of screaming for your attention, you just sort of tune them out because you're so focused on winning this contest against the clock. So you might find that idea helpful to keep you on track for monitoring your time. Now the fourth tip is to use a time tracker. And we have talked about this in another video, how we can track our time the same way that we track our money to try to stay on budget. And you can do this on paper. I find that to be the fastest way. I could just quickly jot it down. But there are also digital options. So basically what you're going to do when you start a task or project, you write down the role and then just a brief description of the project or the task, and you put the time that you started it. And then when you finish it, you're going to put the ending time so that you know how long you spent. Now we talked about checkpoints, so if you want, you could break it down like that on your time tracker. You know, you did step 1 in this amount of time, and then step 2. It's just going to help you be more conscious of your time. It'll help you be more focused during your working hours. So it's monitoring how long something is going to take. And this is so useful later on to estimate time for tasks and projects. So if you're doing the exact same thing again, you know how long it took you last time. So that's a pretty good indication of how long it's going to take. Or if you have a task that's kind of similar, then you can draw that data to give you a more accurate estimate. I find that a lot of people have trouble estimating how long something's going to take. And so when you track your time, this is really helpful because you don't have to just make a wild guess. You can actually use data from before to have a really good idea of how long something's going to take. Now the fifth tip is to make adjustments when necessary. Sometimes a task is going to take longer than you planned, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try. And that's just because there are unexpected things that come up. Maybe there was an interruption that was critical and there was nothing you could do about it. Or maybe you had a computer issue, or maybe you couldn't find the information you were looking for. So you were trying to focus, you were really trying to monitor your time, but there was just some unexpected challenge that came up. So what do? Well, you have to adjust other things. So you ask yourself, can I do this task quicker? Or can I do my next task faster? Or you might want to look at it and say, are there any parts of this that could be eliminated? Things that don't have to be done right now. Maybe they're not actually necessary. Maybe I can just completely eliminate them. Or maybe I can move them to another day or another time. Because when things go wrong and they take longer than they're supposed to, you just have to focus on what is most urgent. You check your priorities, and that's how you decide what you're going to do next. So monitoring your time is going to help you get the crucial things done, and you can make adjustments as necessary based on your priorities. So we have looked at 5 tips to help you monitor your time. The first tip is to have a clock nearby. The second tip is to check the time every few minutes. The third tip is to set checkpoints for longer tasks to break them into smaller steps. The fourth tip is to use a time tracker. And the fifth tip is to make adjustments when necessary so that you can accomplish your most urgent priorities. So, I have a question for you. Do you ever lose track of time when you are working? Feel free to comment below. Do you ever lose track of time when you are working? Be sure to get your free task triage worksheet by clicking the link below in the comments. And stay tuned for more videos in this series, Time Budgeting 101, where we are focusing on budgeting the time in our day.